Jonestown, built as a multiracial paradise.
There's no racism here, and it's the most beautiful feeling.
As an example of how the world could live.
These people really believed that they could change the world.
Until the dream shattered.
Get moving, get moving, get moving. Die with a degree of dignity.
And turned into a nightmare. 913 died. Mass suicide or mass murder. Guyana, South America. Here in a place called Jonestown, a crowd of Americans. Young, old, black, white.
Whatever the comments are, there are some people here who believe that this is the best thing that ever happened to them their whole life.
A multiracial, quasi-religious socialist organization. Jonestown is named after Jim Jones, the charismatic 47-year-old preacher who is the temple's leader. Some relatives of people living in Jonestown claim that he's holding temple members against their will. Who is Jim Jones and what is his message? Is Jim Jones mentally unstable?
We began to hear stories about guns, about people who had claimed when they tried to escape that they were being mistreated.
The 18th of November, 1978.
We were asking a lot of questions. We're demanding to see things that they didn't want us to see.
All the secrecy and restrictions raise the question, who is really running People's Temple? In the morning, this woman steps forward and tells Ryan, "I want to go with you. I want to leave Jonestown." The reporters talk to Jones about the people leaving. Anyone who leaves the temple is labeled a defector.
The NBC crew was doing an interview with Jones and confronting him. And it was that interview, clearly, that I think set the stage for what was about to happen.
People play games, friend. They lie, they lie. What can I do about liars? Are you people going to leave us? I just beg you, please leave us. Bill, we will bother nobody. Anybody wants to get out of here can get out of here.
How does Jones maintain such control? The 19th of November 1978, 2 a.m. Two Jonestown residents who have fled the compound arrive in Port Kaituma. They tell Guyanese authorities that Jones is coercing people into killing themselves. A contingent of Guyanese soldiers rushes to the encampment. They arrive as day breaks to find this grisly scene. It appears that about 400 of the temple members are dead. But it's unclear how they died. Is this mass suicide or mass murder? While they wait for autopsies, Guyanese officials leave the bodies where they're discovered. Near the bodies are tubs of purple liquid. Investigators quickly realize that it's a grape-flavored drink, laced with cyanide. Authorities place the initial death toll at approximately 400. They believe that hundreds of other temple members have escaped into the rainforest surrounding Jonestown. But when American soldiers arrive to remove the dead, they make a shocking discovery.
There were mounds of people, and as we pulled off the surface cover, we found more and more people under the mounds.
When all the bodies are counted, the final death toll is 913, which includes Jim Jones and almost 260 children. At this point, it appears they died willingly, at the urging of Jones. If this is true, is Jim Jones solely responsible for these deaths? This horror raises many questions. As we start to answer them, a story emerges about one man and the beautiful young women who supported him. Who is Jim Jones and what is his message? He is a charismatic Christian preacher who champions the cause of the underclass. 1956, Indianapolis, Indiana. 25-year-old Jones is a Methodist minister when he establishes the first People's Temple with his wife. He preaches social justice and the inclusion of all races in his church. Faith healings are also a regular feature at Jones's services, and he encourages his followers to call him Father or Dad. Over the next 6 years, Jones and his wife have one child and adopt 4 more. His church grows to almost 1,000 congregants and opens a soup kitchen and a nursing home.
Jones had such a clear message about reaching out to vulnerable people, feeding the hungry, providing shelter for the homeless.
During this time, Jones shows signs of paranoia. He believes he's being investigated by the government's tax department. What draws people to Jones's teachings and the temple? Jones's message of racial equality and the practice of core Christian beliefs. This fits in perfectly with the counterculture movement of the 1960s and attracts many young people. Jones calls his ministry apostolic socialism. As the temple's good work continues in the public view, dark stories from within the church's walls filter out. Jones's faith healing meetings are said to be staged.
I don't think he healed anyone, period. I think Jim gave people cancer from the pulpit, you know. It's, hey, call somebody's name out, you've got cancer. But I don't think he healed anyone who came and said, Jim, I have cancer. Can you heal me?
As some members become disillusioned, how does Jones maintain control? Through coercion, intimidation, and manipulation. Jones encourages members to live communally with other temple members. Leslie Cathy is 13 when she becomes a member of the temple, with her mother and sister.
Basically, you were supposed to turn over your monies to the church.
They had all your money, you didn't have nothing. You couldn't just walk off.
Members turn over to the temple their earnings and their social security and welfare payments. Compensation for foster children housed by the church also goes into temple coffers. Hugh Fortson joins the temple in 1972. He likes the fact that the church helps those living in poverty.
Little did we realize that all we were doing was wearing ourselves out psychologically, that we couldn't think for ourselves.
The group becomes known as the Gang of 8. This defection feeds Jones's growing paranoia, and he publicly talks about mass suicide for the first time.
I've lost interest in this old world. I would just as soon bring it to a screeching stop in one glorious moment of triumph. So you think about it.
Children don't commit suicide. Seniors don't commit suicide. What happened in Jonestown in that day was murder.
It is murder from one sense, because Jim didn't tell the truth.
They were isolated from knowing what's really happening in the world. I think they were scared into committing suicide, you know. So if you're scared into doing something, it's murder to me.
How very much I've tried my best to give you the good life.
In this audio recording of the final hours, Jim Jones and others speak to the assembled residents of Jonestown.
But in spite of all of that I've tried, a handful of our people with their lives have made our life impossible. Take the portion like they used to take in ancient Greece and step over quietly, because we are not committing suicide. It's a revolutionary act. If we can't live in peace, then let's die in peace.
His followers cheer.
It was all for one and one for all.
Please get us the medication. It's simple, there's no convulsions with it, it's just simple, just please get it. Before it's too late, get moving, get moving, get moving. Don't be afraid to die.
Then the final exercise begins.
But everybody get behind the table and back this way, okay? There's nothing to worry about. Everybody keep calm and try and keep your children calm.
The adults who drink the cyanide do so for their own reasons. But the nearly 260 children who are forced to drink it or are injected with it are clearly murdered.
And the older children can help love the little children and reassure them. Aren't crying from pain. It's just a little bitter tasting, but they're not crying out of any pain.
One by one, each adult member chooses to die.
No other way I would rather go than give my life for socialism, communism, and I thank that very, very much.
These people really believed that they could change the world, and Jim Jones took advantage of their belief to encourage them to see themselves as symbolic martyrs, as people whose deaths would be more significant in creating a new world than their lives.
Appropriately, it is Jim Jones who speaks the last words on the tape.
Take our life from us. We laid it down. We got tired. We didn't commit suicide. We committed an act of revolutionary suicide, protesting the conditions of an inhumane world.
Ironically, Jones never drinks the poison. He is found shot to death with a gun lying almost 20 feet away. Some believe that Jones did not commit suicide, but that another person pulled the trigger. It is clear that Jones is responsible for the deaths of his followers, but is he solely responsible? On the surface, yes.
The only way that the suicides would not have happened is if Jim Jones himself had convinced his leadership circle that it made more sense for them to live than die. But he did not do that.
The inner circle's responsibility for the mass death at Jonestown. Coming up on the final report. The 19th of November, 1978, Jonestown, Guyana. 913 people die here. Almost 260 of them are children. Because of the sheer number of the dead, military medical examiners randomly choose bodies on which to perform autopsies. Only 7 are carried out. The coroners determined that 2 people died from gunshot wounds. Jones died from a bullet to the head, some believe to have been inflicted by his nurse, who then shot herself. Of the others, cyanide poisoning is presumed to be the cause of death. Now, the final report on the evolution of People's Temple into a cult and the role of the inner circle in the Jonestown deaths. When Jones establishes People's Temple in Indiana, it starts out as a small Christian sect.
The Bible was read from, Jesus' name was mentioned often, and there was preaching and healing and singing, and it was very much a traditional church experience. People's Temple becomes a cult once they move to Jonestown. It's when new ideas can't get in and people can't get out.
My definition of a cult would probably be Jonestown, because you weren't allowed to leave. You didn't have any say-so. You had no opinion.
In Jonestown, Jones and his leadership created an insular world and used lies and intimidation to prevent people from leaving.
We can't go back. They won't leave us alone. And there's no way we can survive.
On the final audio tape, Jones manipulates the members' commitment to the temple's political and social goals to coerce them into choosing to die.
Die with a degree of dignity
Lay down your life with dignity. Don't lay down with tears and agony. Stop this hysterics. This is not the way for people who are socialist, communists to die.
Some journalists and authors investigating People's Temple have concluded that Jones is responsible for the deaths. Mary McCormack Marga believes that although Jones initiates the idea of revolutionary suicide, it's the inner circle that implements the suicides.
Jim Jones could not make anything happen without his lieutenants, without that inner circle of committed people who believed in Jones' ideas and wanted to make them happen.
He surrounded himself with people who worshipped him and who, did a lot of the legwork for him, and he only kept the people who, would never dream of turning against him or criticizing him. So he never got any authentic feedback on how crazy he was getting.
So the inner circle, they're a big part of this.
Jonestown had grown too quickly. Food and supplies were stretched too thin and couldn't provide for the nearly 1,000 residents. It had not become the self-sufficient, utopian community that Jones and the leadership had promised.
They saw suicide as the only option and also free them from a situation that had become untenable.
We're all ready to go. If you tell us we have to give our lives now, we're ready. I'm pretty sure all the rest of the sisters and brothers are with me.
On the 18th of November 1978, the adults of Jonestown were ready to go, and they murdered their children before killing themselves. Jim Jones has come to represent the worst of charismatic leaders who exploit and abuse their followers to achieve their own ends. And the temple members have become examples of those who submit completely to a leader and his message. These people surrendered control over their own lives to someone who led them to a tragic end in a place called Jonestown.